Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? With Sports Interaction. You got to get in the game with Sports Interaction. You can bet live in-game or pre-game or all your favorite hockey matchups. It's going to be a fun one, and we want you to just have a little fun. Head over to sportsinteraction.com/STPN, or you can download the app on the QR code. Just snap a picture with it. Super easy. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
Hey everyone, our guest this episode was literally raised in an NHL family. His father, Fred Shero, played around 150 games in the NHL with the New York Rangers and later coached the Broad Street Bullies, the Philadelphia Flyers, in the 1970s to 2 consecutive Stanley Cups. He was the 216th overall pick by the LA Kings in the 1982 NHL Draft, while playing college hockey at St. Lawrence University. He started off in the hockey industry as an agent, then moving into the front office of the Ottawa Senators, and that's where we first met. After several years, he became assistant GM of the Nashville Predators, working closely with longtime GM David Poile for about 8 years. In 2006, he became the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, where he won the Stanley Cup in 2009. We all remember that Game 7 in Detroit at Joe Louis Arena. He was the GM of the New Jersey Devils from 2015 to 2020 and is currently working as a senior advisor to Minnesota Wylde GM Bill Guerin. Let's give a big welcome to Jean Shero.
Yeah.
Thank you, fellas. Thank you, Allan. Thank you for my real name as well, Jean. My mom would be very proud, very happy.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that Jean is your true first name.
Yes, that's it. My mom was from Shawinigan, and my father was from Winnipeg. But so the Jean name, I changed to Ray when I was like in 4th grade because no one in New Jersey, substitute teachers, could ever pronounce my name, and it was kind of embarrassing every time a substitute came in, and they're coming down to the S's, and I'm like, oh God, and Regine or read this, and next thing you know, the one's like, Regine, is she here today? I'm like, oh God. So I just said to Mom, I was in 4th grade, I came home and said to my Mom, there's no way. I tried. So that was kind of informally changed it to Ray, but she would still call me Ray Jean, which was good, and so do you sometimes. So,
So how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Just here in this is my second year. Finished my second year with Minnesota, and it's been great. Obviously, with Billy Guerin, we're actually in Minnesota this week for our pro meetings, and next week amateur meetings here in Minnesota. So it's a nice time to be in Minnesota. Beautiful weather.
What do you remember about your dad's coaching with the Flyers in the 70s and the 2 consecutive cups? What do you remember about those years?
Unfortunately, I remember almost everything, Allan. He was there for 7 years, and I was 9 to 16 years old, and it was something. I'm very fortunate in that respect, and so growing up around that, and I was very lucky too. I always wanted to go to practice, and as long as school always came first, with my mom and dad, but anytime I wanted to go to practice, my dad hop in, and so I always did. I love being around the rink, and 71, 72 was his first year, and we were renting a house in Valley Kenwood, Pennsylvania. I was in 4th grade, and that was the 1 year they did not make the playoffs. The first year they lost with 4 seconds left, the last game of the season. If they had got 1 point against Buffalo, then they were in the playoffs. And with 4 seconds left, Jerry Meehan from the red line basically scored, and I cried my eyes out, and they missed the playoffs. And I walked to school the next day. I was in 4th grade, and in this playground, this kid's like, "Hey, Shero, you old man at Favell blew it." And I'm like, Jesus. That's my welcome to Philly moment. 4th grade, I'm like, what the hell? And hey, it could have got a lot worse. Lucky it got better. So, but it was like even the 2 parades, over 2 million people, and 74, 75 was so fortunate to remember almost anything about that. And not, and even in 09 when Pittsburgh won, my kids we're old enough, and which is awesome. And incredible experience, and just a lot of the people that I met along the way, even growing up around the Flyers and before then. It's we kept in touch, and it's been really a fun thing. But it was growing up around that. I guess that's what I did. I grew up around that. It was being around hockey. Growing up was just normal to me, and I never knew why it was such a big deal for kids to want to go to games with me. I'm like, okay, yeah, we had an extra ticket. Come on. Well, I guess it's a big deal. And to me, it was just the way it was, I guess. And but I always appreciated it and look back at it, and with incredible fondness and gratitude.
Ray, I gotta say, looking at pictures from the '70s, because it unfortunately predates me. The one thing that really stands out about your dad is he seemed really cool. Like, he had a great handlebar mustache. Seemed to wear really cool sunglasses. He seems to have embodied that Flyers team from the '70s. And how much? I mean, obviously you were a kid, but looking back at it, how much was he that personality that sort of set the tone for the rest of the team?
I think I would say probably that was his demeanor at home, and he was he was very supportive. I guess no different than his players. I mean, from myself and my brother, is very supportive of us no matter what we wanted to do, and education, as I mentioned, always came first, and and he really encouraged us to play other sports, and I'm very thankful for that, and I think that was kind of him, and like he didn't really raise his voice much to us and kind of to his players, and but you take a look at that, and one of the good things, it's fun, back in the '70s, but when he was inducted in the Hall of Fame back in 2013, Ed Snyder, who was obviously the owner since day one, Ed was still alive, and he chartered a plane, and all the former Flyers came up, and the Hall of Fame had never seen that, but that was kind of between Ed Snyder, Keith Allan, who was the general manager, and my father. Fortunately, all three in the Hall of Fame, but that was an incredible situation in terms of the way they did things. I mean, in terms of alumni, in terms of how they treated the player wives and coaches' wives, and it was a situation to be around, and as someone would say, there's first class and then there's Flyer class, and the way they did things, it was really cool to see that and grow up around it. And again, it was kind of normal for me, but that's the demeanor you saw, and when you think some of the coaches of Broad Street Bullies, and would be that wasn't his nature, though. That was even though he was a boxer growing up in the Canadian Navy and everything like that, and played the NHL for 3 years, and he really was much of a good fight. And Stan Fister says the only fight that Gordie Howe did not win, but he didn't lose, was against my father, and he gave me the actual newspaper clipping of it from 1951. Wow. It was really incredible. Yeah, so you look back at some of that stuff, and some of the history, and it's really kind of cool. But I'd say that I'm not sure what to make of I'm not sure who dressed them, to be honest with you, back in the day. But I mean, honestly,
some of those plaid suits from behind the bench. Wow!
Oh my God, yeah. No, I all came back, and I watched Boogie Nights. I think that was so it was something. Like, honestly,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was really incredible. And you look at it now, yeah, it's kind of cool, I guess. It's looking like Walter White or something. I don't know.
He looks cool
with the glasses. Yeah,
style, so, really cool.
Yeah. Well. That's good. That's good. I guess they say it always comes back in style, And it was back in the '70s. Oh boy, and the Fu Manchu and the glasses, and holy cow! I mean,
it's awesome.
Well, he also coached that ragtag New York Ranger team to the Stanley Cup Finals in 70, 78, 79.
Correct. Yeah, that was something. I was 16 then. I was actually in prep school at the time in New Hampshire, so. I was only able to go to games when I would be home for break or whatever it was. And, for them to, upset the Islanders in the semifinals to go to the finals. And, that was quite something. And, they got that close in 79. But, John Davidson was a goalie of that team. And they had some really, Phyllis Bazilin on that team. And it was really cool. And, being 16 and, 16, 17 years old, seeing that and being around New York City. And just, when they go to the finals, holy cow. And, they lost to a pretty good team in Montreal, I guess. But of course, the series before, that was the 2-minute on the ice penalty for the Bruins against the Canadiens in '79, right? And of course, the Bruins
Don Cherry behind the bench,
exactly.
And then Guy Lafleur scored to send the game into OT.
Exactly, and of course, Boston is because the Rangers already beat the Islanders like a day or two before, so of course the Bruins are like from that, Game 7 on, they've said forever, if we would have won, we would beat the Rangers. And of course, the Rangers if the Bruins won, we would have beat the Bruins. So, and pretty certain both teams are like, damn, it was going to be hard to beat Montreal. That's for sure. They were that good. But yeah, incredible experiences there as well. So that's, it's very fortunate that they said that I've been at that age to remember stuff like that and the people. And even when my dad coached the Flyers or the Rangers, and even I see Phil Esposito, it's like, it's just because my dad coached him, and that was always been a thing. And I see a lot of the Flyers along the way, and it's just the reminiscing. And I apologize. I stole most of their sticks when I was a kid, and I must have been the biggest pain in the ass being in the locker room. But I was always very respectful as a kid too. It was always Mr. Clark or Mr. Prawn or Mr. Barber or whoever, or Mr. Lewis, or the equipment manager. And but it was a good time to be around the Philadelphia and New York. That's for sure.
So I was at Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals that year in '79, and series that was the deciding game at home in the Montreal Forum, and that was that was the end of the 4-year run of the Habs winning 4 cups in a row. It was Ken Dryden's last game he ever played as a Montreal Canadien in the NHL.
Wow!
It was Scotty Bowman's last game with the Montreal Canadiens because he left to become Coach GM of Buffalo after that win. Jacques Lemaire left. He went to Switzerland to play there, and that was also a year of transition. Sam Pollock to Irving Grunman. Grunman won the cup in 78, 79 with basically Sam's team, but then everything kind of blew apart, and that was the end. But I remember vividly, I was at the game with my dad watching your father behind the bench.
Yes, and I'll tell you a funny story about behind the bench there at the old Forum, and my dad would tell me this, and I remember those. And by the way, they all left the next year. Why didn't they leave the year before, those Canadians? The Rangers might have won. Jesus Christ.
Bad timing.
Thanks for telling me. But my father, when he coached, he always his sport coat usually, he always said like his rosary beads in his when we get tight on the ice, whatever, he would reach in his pocket and kind of grab them. Well, my mom was saying like the next day when they came home, I don't know if it was in the finals, but it was definitely in Montreal, and my mom was all upset about something. Like, man, what happened? Oh, nothing. It's all good, but I guess your dad was coaching last night in Montreal. People walk behind the bench, right?
Yeah.
They would go right behind the bench.
Right behind the bench.
Right behind the bench. And my dad, there must have been, down in the Flyers zone, and my dad's like reaching for his road. Next thing you know, he's like, what the hell? Some guy's got his hand in his pocket. He's like, what the hell's going on here? They're right there in the game. Like, oh boy, the Flyers, whenever they went to Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, not much good happened. Usually we're in jail or in Vancouver, or, Toronto would throw someone through a glove at one of the usherettes, unfortunately, and they got thrown in jail. And I don't know. They probably, Allan, you know who the counsel was for the Flyers at the time was Gil Stein.
That's
so I'm sure
right.
he got him on it. I'm sure Gil Stein's got him on to some stuff.
Gil Stein, who when John Ziegler was removed after the 1992 players' strike, Gil Stein was temporarily installed as the president of the NHL. And the first thing he did when he became president of the NHL is he nominated himself for the Hockey Hall of Fame. True story.
That is a true story. And he actually got in as a Boulder, but they took him out after, right?
Exactly.
So, anyway, hey, if you get in,
whatever it takes, I guess.
It's pretty brazen to be able to get yourself into the Hall of Fame, get nominated. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Is John Ziegler in the Hall of Fame?
Yes, he is.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
is he? Okay, I didn't remember.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
That's something. Got it. Wow, that's something.
Yeah.
Jesus, it's right.
So when you were done with school and your playing career, you became an agent.
Mm-hmm.
What motivated you to do that? What in the world motivated you to do that?
If you ask it another time, I'll actually think about it. I don't know. It's funny. It's so when I got into St. Lawrence, I was drafted by LA and after my sophomore year. But it's funny, I was supposed to get drafted after my freshman year, and I didn't. And then I, went to the World Junior Tryouts, which were in Colorado Springs, and I tore my knee up in July, and I missed my whole sophomore season.
Oh.
And I got drafted after that season. I didn't even play. I'm not sure they're aware I didn't play, but I didn't play. So, but then, and I played 2 more years, and I had a good college career, and I was offered a 3-way contract, like $10,000 a sign. Rogie Vashon was the GM.
Yep.
And Pat Quinn was the head coach, and cool. Pat, he started his coaching career with my father in Philadelphia, which is incredible. But I went without a contract instead, and I had a very good camp. And at the end, I was offered at the same time, after a month of, back then there was no 3-hour rule, I was like, holy cow. And, Rogie said they were splitting their AHL team at the time in New Haven with the Rangers. So they had 2, I was center. They had 2 spots for center, and the Rangers had 2 spots. So I would have to go to Toledo. I'm like, after a month, I was like, I would actually play with Don Waddell, by the way, in Toledo if I had done that. But I decided not to. So my first thought is that a lot of my friends, I wanted to, work Wall Street. And lucky, that didn't, LF Rothschild, all these firms are like the Bear Stearns that I interviewed with are all kaput. And then while I was waiting, I had an opportunity. A buddy called me from Boston I went to school with, and this guy was, what I wanted to do, because I was passionate about hockey, I would have gotten to scouting if I had an opportunity for sure, but that wasn't there. So this was like the next thing to do. And, that was back in 1986 or 7. So I did it for maybe 6 years. And, back then, certainly the money for players was not like anywhere close to where it is now, but it was, to me, I was passionate about being around the game, and that was the way to do it. I think, that is just a guess on my part, Allan, but, I outside of the top 10%, which you're obviously there, but so many of the agents that are in it now, that somebody would, if they had the opportunity, would love to be on the team side.
Yeah.
And, and it's both are hard businesses, but that's really, I probably got in the agent business because I wanted to be in hockey, and that was the best way to go about doing it. It was and fortunately for me, I didn't do it for anything except I was young. I was maybe 25 or something like that. And, it ended up being very good for me just because of all the people I met. And, you see so many games and the parents you meet, and you're talking to meeting NHL scouts, and that availed me to a lot of different things. And so that's probably why I did it. And I don't know if it was an end game for me or what. I just like being around the game, and that's kind of served how I got in. And everybody gets in a certain way into hockey or something, and that was my way to get in. And I'm not sure I'd still be doing it. That's for sure. But I'm very fortunate. I was very fortunate. I mean, again, like that, I moved to Boston, and I'd never lived in Boston before. Now, Boston's really home, and so that was really good. And it's maybe I'm not sure exactly what I was doing at times, but I'm happy I did it. And so, but back then, I mean, it was again no one made a ton of money in terms of some of the guys. I think back in when salary disclosure came out, I think Ray Bork was in '89. Ray Bork, or 1990, Ray Bork was making $350.
Yep.
Right. The guys make more than $350 in the AHL now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when salary disclosure came out, I think there was only 3 players over $1 million in the entire.
So it'd be Wayne, Mario, and who?
I was looking at it. I was doing a project and putting some of that stuff together about a year ago, and there were 3 players. I don't remember the third player, but that was I think Dave Taylor.
Dave Taylor.
Really?
Yeah, I think Dave Taylor
that's right.
Yeah, he had a really big contract back then.
Well, having said that, just that was funny about the news today with Craig Conroy with Calgary, which is awesome, and Dave Taylor, obviously been the GM of the LA Kings for a long time, and now Jarmo Kekalainen with the Clarkson guys. Even though I went to St. Lawrence, they're the Clarkson guys, and that's great. You bring up a guy like Dave Taylor and stuff like that, but I think you're right. He probably was. And but Allan, were you in the agent business before salary disclosure? No, right?
No, my first year was '96. I got in right after a half-season lockout. My timing was great. NHL's locked out into January '95, and that's basically when I started in the agent business. When I left the prosecutor's office. Yeah,
that was I tried negotiating at 26 or 7, whatever it was at the time, with Harry Sinden without salary disclosure. Honestly, here's how it went. The player was Bob Beers. Remember Bobby Beers? From
Sure.
Played the NHL. What a wonderful guy, and does an amazing job on radio for the Bruins for a long time now. And it was Bob Beers. So I remember gave across Harry's desk, him the proposal, all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, hopefully we get this done, quickly, whatever. And Harry just went like, not at these numbers, kid. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I don't get a backup plan. What numbers would you like, Harry? I mean, what the hell?
And you're negotiating in a void because you don't know what anybody else is making.
You don't know,
right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, and it was crazy when you think about it. And I mean, he reached into his drawer here. He had like a little black book, and he like flipped it. We gave Bob Joyce this, and we'll give your guy this. I'm like, what is it? Like, I don't even know what he says. Oh, I was okay. Yeah, it wasn't much negotiating with Harry, and but it was amazing. And but it's so funny how that came full circle, because when again, I go back to when I started, I got the agent business, and why? Probably because I was passionate about hockey, and I was assistant GM in the NHL for 13 years before. In 06, I got the GM job in Pittsburgh, and I say this to the people I talk to all the time, younger people, and I never worked a day in my life to be a GM. I didn't. I 13 years as assistant GM. I love being in the game. I love. My greatest fear was not letting my GM down. That was it. And but I take a look at 13 years assistant GM, 13 years as a GM, and you take a look at that, and a lot of the people that you've met along the way and stuff like that, and and I was the first one that David Poile. I was there with eight years with him, and it was he never had a assistant GM before after 50 years in Washington. So I don't know how he picked me out of a hat, but I'm fortunate he did. And but I had a great situation there, but I got in with Ottawa because Randy Sexton was one of the founders with Bruce Firestone and Cyril Leader of the Senators, and
right.
And after 6 years in the agent business, and we played hockey at St. Lawrence together, but he's not going to call me about the assistant GM job in Ottawa if I'm selling real estate or something like that. I mean, so to me, it paid off in the end. And but even with Harry, it's to go from being scared to death in his office with no salary disclosure to in 2006, I never had an interview to be a GM and ever, and all of a sudden I had I interviewed with both Boston and Pittsburgh,
and you were offered both jobs.
Yeah, it was really something in terms of getting to know Harry. Oh my! I spent a lot of time with him, and a lot of different meetings that they had, and it was really something. I was so impressed, and I was so happy to be able to spend time with him. And he was so smart to me. Like I just really enjoyed it, and that was something to look back. And that's when I first started talking to him back when I was younger as an agent, and coming around, and even spending time with. Go to Buffalo and spend time with Mr. Jacobs, Jeremy Jacobs in Buffalo. And it was really something. And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow. And, then I've never had an interview. And next thing you know, I've got two or whatever. And all of a sudden you get offered both jobs or something like that. It was really, I'm not sure if it worked out for me, and it worked out because Peter Shirley obviously took the Boston job and worked out for him, won a cup there in Boston, did a great job. And, but again, it's one of those things, and I always say the best thing, it's probably the reason I'm on even this thing with you guys is Allan I always say the best thing about being in the game is the people. So, it's, I've been very fortunate that way. And, so try to pass that on as you do as well. And, in terms of some of the younger people who want to get into business and get in direction, but if you're passionate about things and it's not about you, and you just want to be in help. And I think that's a good way to go about it. And, I've been very fortunate in that respect.
So you and I have done a lot of deals together over the years. I've had a lot of players play on your teams. And I always thought, and I don't think I ever told you this, but I always thought that your time as an agent gave you a perspective on the players' lives, especially with their families. And you had a certain sensitivity to that a lot of your brethren in the NHL over the years did not have. And I keyed in on that at times when, things are going well for a player. Everybody's happy. The GM is happy. The agent is happy. Sometimes things aren't going well for the player. And you had a a caring about you, about the player's situation that really impressed me early on. And I've never sat with you. Like, you and I have, had beers, we've had dinners, we've spent time together. I never actually expressed that to you, but that originally was where I said, you know what, this guy's a really good guy because he cares about players. And,
Wow. That's...
I've talked to GMs who have said to me, I don't like agents. Okay.
Yeah.
Why? They don't really care about their players. And over the years, there have been GMs who sat with me and said, the one thing about you, you may not be the most popular guy in NHL New York, or you may not be the most popular guy if we took a vote at a GM meeting, but you do care about your players. I'll give you that. And that's the only thing that I really care about, right? Is that you care about the player. And you had that, and you've always had that, and it's something that always made a difference to me.
No, I appreciate that. That means a lot. And I look back, and certainly I think it's, whether it's been in the agent business and, because when people think of the agent business, contracts, they're signing contracts and not for. That's not. It's so much. It's like being a general manager. Everybody thinks, make trades and sign players. Well, that's like 10% of the job. That's not the way it goes. And I really think, having been through that with younger players or families, and when they don't get that offer or they get bought, okay, it affects so many different people. And whether I was assistant GM or specifically like a general manager for 13 years, I always I think that background, but also think that having two boys, and I would always just live my life. How would I want that to treat my kid? And whether it's always about, okay, when I was in Pittsburgh, Sidney Crosby's concussions and whatever, and that, of course. But I just, from seeing my kid go through that at the same time, but also if someone's in Albany, let's say New Jersey's farm team, or in Wilkes-Barre, whatever. They have a concussion or they're injured, they have parents family too. Do you think they're not worried that the death about their kid? I always want to make sure they're as taken care of and making sure that they have the same follow-up care and whatever. And it's about them and it's about their families. And I would say to our minor league coach and that, what's your job? Develop players and win. Yeah, good luck with that. Sorry. But no, here's the story. You know how many players you're going to develop, really? If you're fortunate, come on, 3, 4, maybe, for real. To me, my goal for you, here's what I'd like you to think, is that 20 years from now, when these players are done playing, they're all going to be doing something. And I want that, firefighter, or I want that policeman, or that lawyer, or that doctor, or, that guard, whoever it is, look back and say, you know what, he made a difference in my life as a coach. That's your thing. And it doesn't mean about how much you play them, but it's how you treat them and how. Because they all have things on and off the ice. And as we know, everybody's got something, right?
Yeah. And
it's so unfortunate that it takes, 2-3 years after a player retires, you find something like this out sometime. And fortunately now with the, it's on the forefront of everything, which is important. But again, I always look at it that, if that's my kid, I mean, sometimes I say, I'm thinking to myself, well, that wasn't a good thing for me to say, but well, that's not my kid, whatever, there's sometimes, but I think part of that is, and I think, you're the same way, Allan. You care about your players, without a doubt. And I would say the best thing if my sons, if they needed, hopefully not, but if they needed a lawyer or an agent, which they're not going to need as a player anymore, but that would be you, because you do care about them. And I know your follow-up and your follow-up borderlines on, honestly, a restraining order. But seriously, he knows it. I mean, trust me.
Ray, I want to ask you about something specifically here. About a meeting in Nashville in David Poile's suite at the draft back in 2003. Does that ring any bells with you? What do we have?
Well, yeah, it's actually, I think it's going to be a redo, but the draft in 2023 in Nashville, who knows? But that was at the Hilton Hotel, actually. Allan Walsh had a very good Russian client. I really liked him too, Timo Shishkinov. And you were there with David Shaddy, your partner at the time. And I don't know. And then David Poile is a GM and the assistant GM, and Shish is a second round pick, and he's a high prospect for us. We want to sign him, and of course, Allan's, I don't know. We're talking. Next thing you know, Allan goes, "Excuse me," and I don't know if you wanted to tell us the story, Allan.
I had 2 days of literally no food, so I was like starving to the point of almost passing out. And before the meeting, I just grabbed something from some stand on the way to the Hilton, where the Nashville Brain Trust was all staying. So I get into the meeting and we start talking, and all of a sudden my stomach is like gurgle, 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 and I'm like, I gotta go. And
okay,
and I get up and I head to the bathroom in this. They had this giant suite with a big desk, like a conference room, attached to the suite. And we were in the suite part. We had walked through the conference part, and I just like literally ran to the nearest toilet. And after about 10 minutes, came out of there, and it wasn't pretty.
And your stomach was once again empty.
Yes.
Well, it was So he drops a deuce at David's suite. That's good. And then we give you $700,000 for Shish to sign. I mean, oh my God. I mean, that's what I.
You should have known when he was shitting his pants that you had the upper hand.
Well, I should. I should have known that. I should have known that.
I think what happened was David wasn't originally in our meeting, and he was running later. He was on the phone with another agent or something. It was just me and Ray and my partner David, and then I headed out to the bathroom. And then I came back, and I had like sweat on my forehead, and I sit back down, and then David comes, and then my partner David, who's got an incredible sense of humor, goes, David, Allan left something in the bathroom. Do you want to go get it for him? So
I think David actually looked, and David's like,
he gets up and starts walking towards the bathroom, and I went, "No, don't go in there, don't go in there." And then we kind of let him in on what's going on.
Wow.
Yeah, what was going on was yes, but having said that, you got your client $700,000 to sign. And when you guys left David's suite, David turned to me and said, "I was ready to give me $800,000, but screw that." Poor guy. Jesus. Oh,
Ray,
man.
I want to ask you about David Poile because, man, what a career! Sure. Obviously, Washington and then Nashville, like really amazing career there. What do you think was the thing that you learned from him that sticks out the most? Because very few guys get to just call their own shot and retire. What was your experience there?
It was incredible. I was there 8 years with David, and so many life lessons. And it was a lateral move for me. I had a contract still with Ottawa, but they allowed me to talk to David, and I didn't really know him that well because as assistant GM, you're not traveling those circles, and I was always more intimidated by. My greatest fear if I ever got a GM job was going to a GM meeting. I was so always intimidated by the GMs, like if I was assistant, whatever. But David was just so inclusive, so why would you do that? He would between Paul Fenton or Craig Chandler, guys like this, or Barry Trotz, and why would you do that? Well, he had to think about everything. It was so prepared and so organized, and I mean, I didn't want, again, I go back to that. I never want to let him down, and I still remember he was so organized. His whole notepad, I could see it. He's got everybody, his stuff here for every day. He's got, Craig Leopold or Jack Dillon, the president, myself or Paul Fenton, whatever it is. And I took great pride in being prepared until I went to Nashville. I'm like, so and it was so great. Every day we're in town, we go to lunch, whatever, and just shoot the shit. And Dave was like, "Hey, what's the story? Have you checked back on what's going on with, Allan Walsh's client or something?" I gave Allan a call and I haven't heard back yet. But so we go back to the office after lunch, and he would always go to the men's room, wash his hands, whatever. I'm like, God damn, I forgot that. God, I didn't even call Allan. I forgot about it, right? So I'm like, screw this. like he'd make a left to go to the men's room, right? And I would go, my office is right next to him. I would go into his office, sit at his desk. There's his notepad. I'm like, Ray, where's Ray? Oh, crap, that too? Damn. So that's how I got ahead of it. I'd sneak in and look at my note. Oh, that to do as well, darn it. And how David, I mean, he treated people and their families. Like it's so amazing. And I took a lot from that in terms of how he treated people and everybody. That's just the way it was. But he gave you responsibility and let you act on it, but at the same time, you were accountable for it. I still remember I made a coaching hire for our farm team in Milwaukee, and after a year or two, it didn't work out. And then, so, going through another interview process with the potential coaches, David said, "Hey, where are we on the Milwaukee search?" I'm like, "Hey, I'm down to 2 really good candidates, and I really like to try to get them in front of you next week." And David, with his glasses on, he's making his notes as usual, and David has his glasses on. And he goes, "Yeah, who would they be?" I gave him the 2 names, and David made a note. And next, he just gave one of these. "You better get this one right." I'm like, "Holy shit!" Okay, yeah. And but he was, the what ifs. I think if I remember, as a manager, I would always say the same thing as David. Like in terms of, it's my stuff. I need ideas. Right? I need ideas. So, and we would always try to come up with ideas. And, one day I remember David must have been pissed about something. He just started ripping into me and Paul Fenton, like, "Really? You want to trade this guy and that? Oh, really? Have you ever traded anybody in your life?" "What?" I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, that's your job." "What? Have you ever fired anybody?" No." "Until you do, then shut the fuck up." We're like, really? When you become a general manager, if you guys ever become a general manager, you're going to find out you're going to have to make the last and final decision. It's going to be your call, your responsibility. You have to make the final decision. I'm not ready to make that decision and impact someone's life like that. So until you're in this seat, shut up. I'm like, okay. He apologized, like, whatever. I still remember, this is my 8th year that, when I interviewed with Boston and Pittsburgh, and for at least over a month probably back. And so I had the Boston offer, and then like the afternoon, Pittsburgh called and got that. I'm like, oh my God. So I tried to get hold of David because I was out of the office. I was in Nashville somewhere, and I stopped at Starbucks and I tried calling him, and I actually tried calling my wife, couldn't get a hold of her. So I called David and I got a hold of him. I go, "David, holy cow." He goes, "Hey, what's going on?" I go, "Listen, I just got an offer from Pittsburgh." Ken Sawyer called, and he's like, "Holy cow." I go, "Yeah, David, here's holy crap, the Boston thing, here's the Pittsburgh thing. What should I do? What do you think?"
Yeah, you had 2 offers on the table at the same time.
Yeah. And I was at Starbucks, and, David's like, "Well, Ray, that's incredible. You're going to be a general manager." And I'm like, yeah, but which one should I take? And David's like, "Ray, 2 great opportunities, it seems. Remember all the time I'd say to you, when you become a general manager, you always have to make the final call? Well, you're going to be a general manager. You have to make the final call. Tell me what you do." And he hung up on me. And I was like, what? I was like, and to me though, for David, it was the perfect thing. It was like, oh my God. And I realized that was him. He's like, he took me that far. Now I have to make a decision. That was my first decision as a GM, is deciding what to do. It would have been a lot more comfortable if David had made it for me, but it was a great way for him to say, "Hey, good luck. Tell me what you do." Mm-hmm. And he hung up. I'm like,
wow,
that's what the hell going on here? But no, I look back so fondly in the days with David and in Nashville, and we had some incredible experiences and people, and I just talked to him a couple weeks ago for a while. It was fun to catch up, and it was an incredible experience, and living in Nashville is just something real special.
Yeah. So right now we have new management in Calgary. Craig Conroy was announced as the new GM today, with Dave Nonis joining him in Calgary. Toronto GM job is open. The Pittsburgh GM job is open. Can you take us inside? What's it like to interview for a general manager? What do you talk about in an interview? What kind of questions are asked of you? And how do you prepare for that?
I think it depends the organization and their style as well. And for instance, like with Boston, that was the first interview I ever had, and Harry Sinnen was good friends with David Poile, and I remember I had a conference call in David Poile's office with Harry and David, and Harry's like, hey, next Tuesday, if you're not busy, we'd like to have you come to the Boston and for an interview, and it'll be myself, Charlie Jacobs, and that would be just the two of us, and but I don't want to catch you or anybody surprise. So what I'm thinking is, I'd like to, if I get David's fax number, if I can fax you a set of questions. I'm like, looking at David thinking, Jesus Christ. I'm like, that'd be fantastic. The questions, he's like, yeah, I'd like to, I want to talk hockey, and I'd like to, send you some questions, and which I still have. I think they were just amazing because in terms of what you think about. And the only thing that he goes, is that all right? The only thing I said to Harry, I remember saying was like, geez, I wish this was like I had this in school. I get the questions before the test. That'd be great. And and Pittsburgh wasn't like that. Like with Ken Sawyer and Ted Black, interviewed with them, and it was a 3-hour. We just talked, and it was I'd been through maybe 5-6 weeks of interviews with Boston, and then it was only one interview with Pittsburgh, and I still remember I went to Pittsburgh. It was raining like hell, and spent 3 hours with Ted Black and Ken Sawyer, and I still. David Poile said to me about the Boston thing. I know Harry goes, if at some point if he's interested enough, you're going to be asked about any money expectations or term in your contract. I'm like, thinking like, yeah, okay, sure, right. Yeah, I'm like, when that happens, what do you think, David? He goes, I'm telling you, tell Harry you only want 1 year. What? 1 year? Oh, David, are you nuts? He goes, I'm telling you, Harry will love it. I'm like, well, sure enough, that never got to that point with, I got a contract offer. It was for more than 1 year with Boston, obviously. But when I had the offer or whatever, I'd said that. And I didn't, okay, then I go to Pittsburgh, and I don't know, I just felt very confident going through all the stuff I did with Boston, and I had a great interview with Pittsburgh, but it was just, we just talked different things. And I remember Ken Sawyer, I must have been going okay for like an hour and a half, and Ken turned to me and said, Ray, just not to put the cart before the head of the horse, but if we were to ever offer you this position, what would you be thinking of in terms of, salary or term on a contract? And I just told him, I said, salary wise, I think, kind of whatever the entry level salaries are for GMs. I mean, and he goes, okay, what about term? I'm like, the 1 year. What? Yeah, 1 year. Why would you possibly want 1 year? I'm like, because I know I'll do a great job and I'll make a lot more money. And Ken's like, Ken Sawyer's looking at Ted Black, and he's, okay, he's writing notes, and he asked me another question, and we're talking, and he stops in the middle of and he goes, wait a second, are you serious about 1 year? I'm like, yeah, I am. And I go, Mr. Sawyer, I got to say, like, I understand that you cannot hire a general manager and trot him out. Hey, our new GM's got a 1 year contract, but that's how comfortable I am, and I can do a very good job. And, but that's how I feel. And so sure enough, ended up getting a 5 year deal, whatever. And, after I got a 5 year deal, and after the first year though, because the team went from 58 points to 105, right? And I think I had a bonus for 88 points or something, and we made the playoffs too. But I still remember after Ottawa beat us in the first round, they went to the finals that year, but it was the incredible first year. And I still remember I got an email from Ken Sawyer a couple of weeks later. Hey, if you can come by the office tomorrow, 2 o'clock, something like that. I have your bonus check or whatever for the playoffs. And he goes, P.S. Thank God you didn't take. I didn't sign you a 1 year contract. And that was something. I mean, that was it with Pittsburgh. What a great experience! Like Ken Sawyer, Tim Black, and it was really something. And Allan, we worked together quite a bit there too, obviously with some of your players, and it was fun.
What about a young Sidney Crosby? What was that like?
He was. Sid is a really incredible. First time I met him was he was 19, and he was after his rookie year, and he had 102 points, I believe, as an 18-year-old. But he was at the World Championships when I got the job. So when he came back to the town, it might have been June or July, I can remember June or something like that. And this is kind of how it went for 8 years with Sid, is that, I told him I would like to get together with him and, get to know each other. And so we had lunch. I think it might have been, I'm not sure where it was in Pittsburgh. We had lunch, and it was 3.5 hours. And that was the shortest meeting I ever had with Sid, was 3.5 hours. It was usually 4 hours easy. And there was so much on his mind and all that stuff. And to see, for 8 years, by the time he's 19, until, for 8 years with him. And he still even remember, like, coming off his rookie contract, and he saw, obviously he signs the 5-year deal at 8.7. And, sitting, I remember at Mellon Arena there, Allan, obviously Craig Patrick's former office, and my predecessor, Craig Gibbs. That's tough. 2 GM jobs. My predecessor, Craig Patrick and Lou Lamoriello. Gee whiz. Like, that was tough. That's tough. But it was, so I remember when Sid signed his extension, for his 5-year deal at 8.7, and how, whatever. At the same time, Ovechkin had signed for 13 a week or two earlier, 13 years. But, it's one of those things I say all the time, like, it was 13 years, 5 years, didn't matter. If they signed him for 13 years, he's not happy, you're going to have to trade him anyway. And if he likes it enough, he's going to stay, which he obviously have. And so when we sat down, we're, going through everything, I go, hey, listen, do you realize next year how much money you're going to make per day? Let's say that whatever the salary was, let's say it's 8.7, whatever it was, over 187 days. You're going to make this every day. What? How much? Like, wow. And he goes, I guess I shouldn't take any optionals. Huh? I should, like, that's a lot. Like, so, it's like, so, but to see him, like, they go through, I mean, and I even though I was there 8 years, and we won a cup with the finals another year, with the semifinals another year, I think we should have won more than one. We did. And then I really think that it was beneficial, even when I got turfed, when Jimmy came in. It took a couple of years. It wasn't easy for these guys. And I really think, Tanger and all that stuff, and Malcolm, these guys, and Mark and Fleury, if it just happened. Because, Sid's second year, we went to the third year, actually. Yeah, third year went to the finals.
Against Detroit.
And then that was against Detroit. If it just, like, rolls on like that, I don't think you ever really appreciate how hard it is. And, in 2009 they win, but then it took, a lot of, disappointments in the playoffs, even with good teams, and, injuries, obviously, to all of them. And then to see them win in, 16, 17 back-to-back, and how hard it was. I mean, I think I can only guess that looking back, it's got to be so satisfying for them. They're always told they were just this. Well, they became this. It became, certainly, I think part of it too, because always compared against the Blackhawks with Kane and Taves and things like that. They had 3 cups, and these guys only had 1, so at least they're tied now, and certainly deservedly so. And but dealing with those guys, and Sid in particular, was something. And
what about noted Allan Walsh client Marc-Andre Fleury as a young man? What was he like?
Mark, probably a lot like he is now, but he's very, Mark is very, it's one of those things too, as Allan knows, been through a lot of tough things with Mark. And, remember back with the yellow pads there, that we lost in the playoffs in, 06, 07. And then we had the yellow pads, and there was some writer or something like that in Ottawa. I think it was
an eye doctor. An eye doctor.
Yes, it said, that said something about yellow pads attract, whatever. I'm like, whatever. So Mark changed his pads, and I remember he'd be sitting in my office, and it's like I'm trying to put on my psychologist hat or things like that. I would call you probably afterward, Allan. Seriously, here's what happened. He's probably going to call you, or what's, and the greatest thing too is every young person's different, as we know. And, even how happy-go-lucky they could be, everybody, grew to find out how competitive Mark is. But again, it's one of those things. I mean, there's some, remember that he had that high ankle sprain there in 07, 08, I think it was. He was out for 6 weeks at least. Calgary stumbled in the crease coming across and high ankle sprain. I'm like, God damn, we're in trouble here. We're on to Danny Savard and some guy who's our goalie in Wilkes-Barre? Oh, okay. Let's call him up, I guess. Well, Ty Conklin saved our ass, right? Ty Conklin comes in and goes like 23-4 or something like that. Wins the outdoor game in Buffalo, and but again, it's like, I mean, like Mark was the C Mark now. Obviously, it's so funny, but what a Hall of Fame career, Hall of Fame person, most importantly, and Allan set a front row seat to all that stuff. And I just Mark is, I think 8 playoff series with Mark, and some good, some bad, some incredibly good, and certainly the one in 09, which is fantastic. And I don't know. I can't, honestly, everybody talks about 09, Marc-Andre Fleury saving Lidstrom at the buzzer.
Yep.
We had a face-off outside the zone with 16 seconds left, and they
hit the crossbar.
That was a little bit earlier, but the face-offs at our zone were what,
6.2 seconds.
6.2. The thing is, everybody's like, that last save of Lidstrom, I can't believe the first one didn't go in. Where Falsky shot through traffic in the point. Like, if we actually didn't lose the draw, or whoever, they just all tied him up and got kicked back to the point where Falsky shot it. I thought that was a great save, and I don't know. I mean, I'd like to say we won in overtime, but I don't know if I'd be still at Joe Louis Arena. I would have been, oh boy, that was something. But he was what a wonderful kid, what a wonderful person, and honestly, his wife is the nicest of be. Is like, it wasn't when we were in Pittsburgh. I think wasn't she? Was she taking classes at RMU? I believe.
Yep.
And also, didn't she do some marketing work for the Penguins? Yeah, didn't she do some marketing work for the Penguins?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a really good group of people, and talk about Letang and Malkin and Crosby, and I can't really talk about those without mentioning Craig Patrick, who drafted those guys, right? And it's nice to see. And I still remember when after my first year, we had the 105 points, and we were playing Ottawa in the playoffs. It was the afternoon of Game 1 in Ottawa, and I called Craig Patrick up and said, "I hope this is your team. I hope you're proud." And and it's because there's so many the Greg Malones and things like that draft these guys, and a lot of them, and everybody's got something to do with it, which is always good. And I know that Craig was always very proud of Marc-Andre Fleury. Obviously 03 traded up to get him, and certainly see that pay off with 09, and then certainly in a Hall of Fame induction at some point, hopefully not too soon, but in the future. So it's always kind of cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So Billy Guerin played for you in Pittsburgh. Later on, he was your assistant GM, and now he's the GM with the Wylde, and you're senior advisor to him. Mm-hmm. What's that dynamic like between the two of you?
With Billy Guerin, I think it's been fantastic. This is my second year with him here, and the staff, and his background is different than mine, and he played for almost 18 years or whatever it is, over 1,000 games, and won 2 cups as a player, and certainly 2 more as an executive with Pittsburgh. And I love the fact that people are different than me, and I'm certainly different now than Billy because of my background. I think that that experience is what he was looking for, and to try to not make the mistakes I made, or as I mentioned, going back to David Poile, idea-wise, ideas. I think my experience is this, and but again, I'd love to be a part of the staff, and then certainly see the way that Billy, deals with people. And again, I learn from people all the time, including him, and which has been fantastic. And he's a real easy person to work with. And but I go back to with opportunities with people. I mentioned Tom Fitzgerald, and the player development world is so critical now to teams both on and off the ice. And when I hired Fitzy in 07 and see how well he's doing as a GM now with New Jersey is really great to see. But with Fitzy, we had drafted Chad Johnson the year before in 06, my first draft at the goalie. He played the NHL for a number of years, and but he was playing college at the time, and so Fitzy, his first month on the job, it was like July of 07, and he's asking me in terms of who do I call the coach? For coach, call the coach. So call the player, get to know them, introduce yourself. So he calls me and says, "I think I screwed up." I'm like, he's only been on the job for a couple of weeks, and it's July. How bad could he? What happened? Well, Fitzy goes, hey, I called Chad Johnson's coach. I'm like, yeah? I'm thinking it's not bad so far. What happened? Well, yeah, I just introduced myself. Hey, I'm Tom Fitzgerald, the new director of player development for the Pittsburgh Penguins and blah, blah, blah. I was going to ask you about Chad Johnson. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, do you think there's a chance like he might play more next year, as a sophomore? The coach goes, I would think so. Yeah, probably. It's like, oh, okay. Tell me about his grades. Is he a good student? I don't really know, Tom. Oh, just call me Fitzy. Okay, Fitzy, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Okay. Fitzy said, what about his work ethic? Also, the coach goes, hey, Fitzy. Yeah. I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm the coach at Alaska Fairbanks. Chad plays Alaska Anchorage. So I'm laughing like you guys. I'm like, Fitzy, there's no way. He goes, yeah, holy shit. He goes, Ray, don't tell anybody. I'm like, oh, I won't. And it was funny because it might have been 2014. I was in Buffalo in September at the prospects, U.S. prospects game, whatever, and I was going in, and Steve Stais, I'd never met him. Steve, he introduced himself, and he's doing player development with Toronto. The Maple Leafs at the time, and yeah, right. And so we're catching up. He goes, hey, Ray, one question. I go, what? Is that a true story about Fitzy and Chad Johnson? And I'm like, what? I go, yeah, that's a true story. He goes, man, that is legendary to development circles. I'm like, oh boy, sorry. So anyway, at least you have to have some fun with that anyway. But Chad Johnson went on to do well for himself, and so is Fitzy. So all good.
Ray, you've got the unique. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
No, so you're working right now as senior advisor to Billy Guerin. What does a senior advisor do?
Well, Billy went to, I think he went to Spain last summer. So when we were at the development camp last year, I told him I wanted a new title. He said, what? I go, a senior advisor. And because I don't know exactly what it is, too. It means you're old and supposed to give advice once in a while. And I think through my time as a GM, I really enjoyed the situation where I would have like an Andre Savard, a former GM, or Don Waddell worked with me as well. Randy Sachs, going on to people that it's, if you look at it this way, or I really enjoyed that. And again, that to me is, especially Billy I think Billy had been a GM for 1 or 2 years, I think. So, to kind of jump in after my experience has been really good. And again, to me, I really enjoy working with different people and different backgrounds and things like that. But in terms of senior advisor, I'll see our team, but I'll see other NHL games or in college games. But as a manager, you always have your pulse on the NHL in particular. You kind of have an idea and know. And I'm very fortunate still to have that connection. And in terms of, again, it's all communication as well. From your GM has got to communicate. Here's to your pro scouts or your amateur scouts, and here's what we're looking for. Here's our needs. Or again, that's when you need the ideas and things like that. And again, it's in terms of my relationships in the hockey world are different than Billy's. And obviously, we went through this a year ago or so with the trade deadline with Marc-Andre, and I basically more of an introduction of Billy and Allan, even though they knew each other. I said to Billy, you can trust Allan. That's my experience. I said, Allan, is that still true? And he said it was. But I think it's one of those things in terms of it's Billy will always say, do whatever you want to do, Ray, but don't kill yourself doing it. I'm like, well, that's not me to be given. I love being at games. I like seeing college games, and I think that's been real beneficial for me. And again, in terms of what I can add, it's not just like in terms of staff and younger staff are trying to help them and them helping me at times too. And that's been very, very, very a great thing for me, to be honest with you. And in terms of, I'll do whatever Billy wants me to do, put it that way. And again, you see a lot of those roles around the league now. And I've been fortunate to have some of those people that have helped me in the past, and I've benefited from it. And hopefully Billy does as well.
And Ray, being a former GM, what's it like for you dealing with agents? Like, do you tend to prefer some over others? Do you Do you dread when Allan Walsh calls you? Like, because you've got that unique perspective. You've come at it from the other side.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I think you always have. So I guess as a manager, it's the same way. You would have a different relationship with other, the 31 GMs, and I think you have to do business. I mean, you're not competitive, right? I mean, so you're not all buddy all the time with the other GMs, or certainly it's competitive and there's jealousies at points, or someone thinks they got screwed over on something, but you become more trusting and vice versa of some GMs. The same thing would hold true to me of the agent business in terms of, some guys you just know, and agents know if somebody screws them over. Mm-hmm. And so does the GM. And I mean, that's why me and Allan had a good relationship over the years, very good relationship over the years, because of the trust. And sometime, I mean, he might need a favor. Okay, if I can help, I will. Not because, why? Because it's the right thing to do. And it might come back, but if it doesn't, all right, well, there's a reason I probably did in the first place, because, we had that relationship, or, and again, I appreciate someone like Allan that would always really went the bat sometime over the line for their clients. But you know what? I respect that. And it's, because he cares, and, he's a defender of his clients, and for sure. And, but I think I always go back to the hockey business about relationships and things like that. And that's what it is as a manager with agents, and some, I never particularly cared for at all. And if they probably didn't care for me either, I didn't give a shit. Like, who gives a shit? Like, seriously. But I know one thing. I mean, my word meant something to me and always did. And, it would be, I never want to be embarrassed. I don't want to embarrass an agent or make them, because something, as Allan said earlier, some people in hockey or GMs, agents, or whatever, like that. Like, I always looked at it like they can help me, they can hurt me, and vice versa to a certain extent. But I believe that, that relationship always would come back sometime. And to me, it's like, now that I'm not a GM anymore, like I still have some of those relationships. It's really good. I know the people I respect and how I was treated, and even like, hey, the best thing is when I'm not in a position to do anything for you as a GM. Well, Allan's always kept in touch and all those things, and certainly my role now with Minnesota, it's it's beneficial. I can try to help him, and certainly try to because my relationship with Allan was much different, as I mentioned, to Billy's with Allan, and if Billy trusts me enough that hey, you can trust Allan, and okay, well, you certainly can, which is good. And anyway, it's been one of those things that I think it is when you think like I'm sure, Allan, you might have other agents in the business that I'm not saying it's friendly with, but you certainly trust and respect, or you might have to compare notes on something, and some other ones that you don't have respect for. Not so much if you lost a client to them or whatever, just maybe there's something that's we're honest about something. Hard to believe.
Well, not everybody's for everybody, right? Not everybody's going to get along.
Absolutely, and I think it's kind of the same thing as a manager to manager, in terms of it's a competitive business, and you just as other GMs like you're dealing with as to who's being honest with you and who isn't. And I'm not saying outright lying sometime, but they're trying to take advantage of something or steer because they want the player, or for the least amount of money they can get them for, not money, but the least amount of assets you can get them for. And but it always comes down at the end to be with anything. It's either good people are good people, and again, Allan and I could fight it over. We have many times over contracts. And remember the draft in 2013 in New Jersey? I was with Pittsburgh. We're doing Pascal Dupuis' contract. We're at the Hilton. Remember, you got up and you told me, you said, I think maybe probably the only time, but you got up and left. You said, "Fuck you." I'm like, I'm sitting there in the lobby. I'm having a beer and we're talking, and all of a sudden you got up and you said, I'm like, is he leaving the building? What's going on here?
Did he?
I remember saying,
I left.
There's no way. I said, there's no way he's coming back, because it's like at 10 o'clock at night in the hotel bar, right? I go, he's coming back. And sure enough, that's not him. That's not him either. So after 5 minutes, I'm like, what the? did he really leave? So I walk out. I walk out. I walk out to where the taxis are or whatever at the hill in Short Hills. And you were standing there waiting for your car or cab or something like that. I'm like, hey, I think you were. I'm like, hey, what the hell? And we ended up getting a deal done later on anyway on Pascal Dupuis, but it worked out well.
Yeah,
it's always good.
Pascal called me the next morning, and he said, Ray called me. Apparently things didn't go well last night.
Oh, I think I did, didn't I? Sorry. Well, yeah,
that's awesome.
He still got a 4-year deal, so that's good. Yeah, that worked out well. That was a great pickup, Pascal, for the Penguins. So and
the Marianosa trade.
Yeah, he did. That's that worked out well for everybody, and for Pascal in particular, and they made him really. They always scored 25 goals a year with no power play goals, no power play time. So that was always pretty good, So it's always good.
That's very funny. Very funny.
Crazy.
Well, Pascal was supposed to be traded to the New York Rangers, and no, he was supposed to be traded to Atlanta.
Okay.
And Donnie Waddell went up to Minnesota, had a meeting with Minnesota management during a game in the GM's box, shook hands on the deal. And the GM Donnie Waddell called his assistant GM in Atlanta and said, the deal's done. Minnesota will call you in the morning and tee up a trade call with the league. And Donnie gets on a plane. There's no Wi-Fi on planes back then. He lands in Atlanta, and he's got a message from his assistant GM. Hey, what's going on? Pascal was just traded to the New York Rangers. So Donnie Waddell calls Glenn Sather, and he goes, what the hell's going on? I had a deal for Pascal Dupuis last night. And Glenn says, I have no idea. And Donnie's really, really pissed off. And Glenn Sather says, well, I'll trade him to you. And they start talking. And Slat said, but I need him. I have an injury right now. I need him to play, like 2 games, and then I'll trade him to you. So Pascal played 2 games with the Rangers and was traded to Atlanta.
Wow, he played 2 games. That was beneficial for me at the end, and it's funny because when that came down to the last minute, the host of the deal, obviously with Pascal Dupuis in there for Colby Armstrong and Christensen and all this whatever. I've known Don Waddell a long time, and then when Atlanta moved to Winnipeg, and obviously they hired Kevin Chauvedet, and so I hired Don Waddell for a couple of years as pro scout in Pittsburgh with me, and he told me about he was nervous wreck because he thought he might have had a deal with Montreal, that it wasn't there, and all of a sudden it was like a minute before the deadline we did the deal, and that's why I go back to the people in hockey and like Don Waddell. And I remember the first year I had Don Waddell pro scouting with us in Pittsburgh. I remember I called him, and Donnie's an amazing guy, and is so happy that his teams have done in Carolina. But I remember calling him, and as a GM, the best thing as a GM, you don't have to play reports in, right? And RinkNet or whatever. That was awesome. So next thing you know, Donnie's putting in play reports, and so I called him. He's like a month he's working for us. He's driving. I always loved driving from Atlanta to Detroit. He'd drive, no radio, nothing. He just like to think, he said. I'm like, oh boy. Okay, Donnie, here's the story. I've been reading your reports on RinkNet. Pretty good. I'm Boston. Like, Donnie, Jesus. RinkNet's got spell check, What? I go, Donnie, you can't spell for shit. Seriously. He goes, whoa. Donnie goes, whoa, Ray, listen. I went to Northern Michigan where N stands for knowledge. Good one. That's a good one. I'm like, Donnie, you're a beauty. You're a beauty. And I still remember when I first met him. I first met him in in 87 in Flint, Michigan. He was player assistant coach, whatever, and he had this business, and I wish I still had the card, his business card. It didn't matter because I could still see it. It was a porta potty business, And he was knocking it honestly. He goes, Ray, I'm telling you, I got NASCAR stuff. I got like golf events. I'm like, wow. He goes, it's great business. So he gave me his card. I remember looking at it. It says Don Waddell, CEO, whatever, and whatever the name of the company is. But the motto was, I'll never forget it, outstanding in the field. And outstanding was 2 words. That was good. He said, what a beauty. Like, it's funny when, that relationship coming full circle, and obviously with Host and certainly with Pascal and how that worked out. And I remember, 5 minutes before we did the deal, I'd given him like Armstrong and Christensen, 2 roster players, and obviously a first round pick and our former first round pick, and all of a sudden I'm like, Donnie, shit. I go, wait a second. I'm looking at our report. I'm like, Donnie, I need a forward back. He goes, what? I need a forward back. And he goes, and I remember about a week or 2 earlier, he had sent something out to all the teams. If anybody have interest in Pascal Dupuis, he's an unrestricted free agent coming up, right, Allan, if I recall. And so I go, what about Dupuis? He goes, what about him? I go, I'll take him. He's like, all right, you got him. I'm like, great. So that's how we got in the deal, thank God. And that's because we didn't have another forward, and that obviously turned into a very good thing for the Penguins and Pascal, and certainly what a wonderful guy and pickup. And it was
that deal was 1 minute before the deadline, finalized.
1 minute before the deadline, and that was
Get that fax in.
That was trust me, that was my first big deal I ever did, and we got the fax in. But I still remember Chuck Fletcher ran to put the fax in, and my knees were shaking. And I walked into my assistant's office, and there's Chuck looking at me. Is everything all right? I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. What? I swear to God, I don't want to do it anymore. And Chuck's like, Ray, I already sent the fax through. Oh, God. I remember that was so bad. I was so nervous. Anyway, it worked out. And anyway, it was one of those funny things. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Crazy.
During, once July 1 hit, you're going all day, late into the night. Ray and Chuck Fletcher would call me usually around 7, 8 o'clock Eastern time when the phone stopped ringing for the day. And Ray and Chuck would pull a couple of beers out of the cooler. I'd pull a beer out of my cooler in the office. We'd go on speakerphone and we'd kind of compare notes and talk about the signings in the day and just kind of catch up together. We did that a couple of years in a row until you lost Chuck to another team.
Exactly, and that's what happened. But that was fun, though, because invariably what would happen, that would be kind of, hey, what happened? What happened here or there? Anything else going on? And, we'd play like an hour or something like that and catch up, and that was fun. And we'd just be waiting, though. Allan always would say, before you guys go, I got another guy. And this is where, hey, I need a favor.
Amazing.
That was
Amazing.
Tough. That was tough. Anyway, good stuff.
Yeah. So, Ray, last question, and I know you've been incredibly generous with your time, and we're very grateful. There's a couple of open GM jobs around the league. Do you have any interest in ever becoming a GM again?
I mean, you never say never. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have done it twice for 13 years overall, and I really enjoy what I'm doing now. At the same time, I guess you never say never, but I'm very happy to see some of the opportunities provided for guys like today, Craig Conroy. I've known a long time, and certainly that was me before. And I'm waiting for the first female GM at some point in hockey, which would be fantastic. But again, you never say never. And having said that, I enjoy what I'm doing now. I love being involved in the loop on everything. And everything happens, it happens. If not, it's been fantastic, and just really thrilled to be in the game. And but if I get another opportunity, that'd be fantastic too. But until then, or having said that, I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and we'll see where it goes. And again, appreciate you guys having me on. That's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, a lot of memories, a lot of laughs.
Yeah.
And I think it's also been incredibly informative to people. Give them a little bit of the behind the scenes in the industry. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. Adam, very nice to meet you, and Allan, we'll talk to you soon.
Ray, great to meet you as well, and I'm looking forward to you growing your dad's mustache.
What about my glasses? Come on.
Oh, you got to get the squared off glasses. Absolutely.
I want to see the plaid suit.
Oh,
Yeah, yes.
Oh, I'll send you a picture, Alan. Trust me, I got one. That's great. Hey,
Thanks, Ray.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet? Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.